Hello and welcome to something a bit different here on VMTV for a change. We've switched it up a little bit. Obviously, as many of you know, there's a huge card coming up on September the 4th that was originally going to take place in London. It is now at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, but it's essentially a Fight Night London card. Tons of UK talent all over the place. A really great card if you're a UK or Europe specific fan. Of course, it's headlined by Darren Till taking on Derek Brunson in a highly ranked middleweight contest. But there's tons of other great fights on there. So today, instead of interviewing a fighter, my guest today is Mr. Brad Wharton. Brad, if you do not know, is a long-running commentator for Cage Warriors. In my opinion, and I can only speak for myself, but he is part of my favourite commentary team to listen to in MMA. That is the team of him and the two Dans, Dan Hardy and Dan Strauss. I think they do a brilliant job, as you've seen over the course of the trilogy events that Cage Warriors have been doing over on UFC Fight Pass. Brad knows some of these Cage Warriors fighters better than any of us ever will. So we got Brad on to talk about some of those Cage Warriors former guys that are competing on the card and just talk through the event as a whole, as well as talk a little bit about his career as a commentator and his involvement in MMA. So thank you to Brad for his time, and here you go, bit of a UFC card preview. So like I said, something a bit new. So if you enjoy it, leave a like, but let's get straight into it with Mr. Brad Wharton. Hey, so let's talk about how you got into commentary in the first place before we dive into the September the 4th card. I'm just curious to know how you got to the position that you're in now.
It all started with an impromptu house party and a hangover.
Right.
So anyone who follows the UK scene will be familiar with FCC. We're literally celebrating the 10-year anniversary this year, so that's pretty cool. But that was a show set up by my friend Adam Tay. Now, I was good friends with someone he went to uni with, and this guy put me in touch with Adam because I was a journalist at the time, and I wanted to write about a grassroots MMA promotion that was just starting.
Right.
So Adam was like, yeah, come down, bring some friends, have a good time. And I did the stupid thing of going out the night before, and I lived in Cambridge at the time, so it's like a 3-hour drive up to Manchester the next day. And on my way home that night, I had some new neighbors that I'd never met before, and I walked past the house and they were having like a housewarming party. So I turned up with a bottle of wine and a bottle of whiskey, and the next thing I know, I woke up in my bath the next day. And we had to drive up to Manchester, and it was just a disaster. I was absolutely just vile with a hangover. And I was trying to record the commentary on my laptop and a karaoke mixer that I bought 2 days before, because Adam had only asked me if I could commentate. Because he just hadn't booked someone. So we was like, look, it doesn't matter if it's shit, it'll be fine. Thankfully, the guy who filmed it ran off with the footage, so it has never seen the light of day. But on the back of that, Adam said, look, come up next time, we'll do it properly, we'll get proper microphones and everything in. So it just started from there, really. And I off the back of that, I started getting a few more gigs. Like, I wouldn't say I didn't take it seriously, but I used to have a bit of a laugh with it. And Adam was kind of cool with that. And all the fighters kind of enjoyed it. You know, we never belittled anyone or made fun of everyone, but we throw a few jokes in and just, just kind of have a good time. So on the back of that, I got like some more bookings on other regional shows. And then in 2012, Cage Warriors hired me to be like a backstage interviewer, because I guess that was probably what I was most known for at the time, was being a writer on the scene, being a sort of a beat reporter and a features writer and interviewing guys. I used to go to UFC and BAMA and everything else, Cage Warriors, etc., and do post-fight stuff. And then Cage Warriors basically brought me in to do like little behind-the-scenes video and pre- and post-fight interviews on Fight Week. And then I ended up kind of like helping out, sort of set the office up on Fight Week and looking after the fighters. And then, of course, John Gooden went to the UFC, and I got 5 days' notice. I just got an inbox message from Paul Dollery, who was the operations manager then. And he said, Graham said you're commentating on Friday night. So
wow,
that was the sort of Monday afternoon, and Thursday, I think, no, the Tuesday or Wednesday I flew to Jordan, and the Friday I did my first ever live TV broadcast. So,
wow,
just jumping at the deep end, and it can't get any more difficult than that.
Yeah. Did you have to adapt your style massively then? Because it, like you said, it was quite like, it was more relaxed take to now. Like, I mean, now watching Cage Warriors broadcasts, I think the team of you and the two Dans, Dan Strauss, Dan Hardy, I can't think of a commentary team where it's like so analytical, like everything is covered, like on all bases. I really think that of all the promotions that I watch, if there's one where I really focus on the commentary, it's with Cage Warriors, because I feel like you really get something. It's not just for people who don't know what's going on. You really get a benefit of, like, for people who do know what's going on, but they want to get a different insight and things. So has your commentary style gone through a lot of shifts with as time's gone on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you have to change what you do based on who you work with, right?
Yeah.
Because, very often on the regional scene, people will book commentators and they'll just get two guys they like, which means they might not have a play-by-play guy and a color commentator. So,
Right.
everyone knows Steve Cook Abbott, right? Canadian Steve. I commentate with him loads, but technically we're both play-by-play guys. So when I work with Steve, I have to kind of go into a bit of a color commentary mode and sort of work around him, and he works around me. And it's the same with Cage Warriors. Obviously, doing a live TV broadcast is very different than being at a regional show and just commentating over fights that are going on YouTube. There's a lot more to think about. You've got a director in your ear, you've got a producer in your ear. You have to do things like, lead into advert breaks and lead into video packages, that kind of thing. But for me, it's a case of like just, knowing the strengths of the guys you're working with and knowing what your strengths are and knowing what your job is. Like, no one wants to hear me stumble through trying to explain how to get out of a submission. So that's the question that I asked to Dan Strauss. Nobody wants to hear me start babbling on about what it might mean to fight for a Cage Warriors world title. That's what Dan Hardy's for. These guys know very specific aspects of the sport, and they're very, very good at explaining it. And that's the key thing as well. It's not just a case of knowing stuff. You have to be able to verbalize it. And, the longer you work with people, you learn the flow and you get into a pattern. I worked with Josh Palmer for many, many years, and we just flowed so well together. We'd so much practice, so much experience. We know when the other one's going to talk. And thankfully, I was obviously a bit worried having one new commentary partner, and then all of a sudden, I was never a fan of the 3-man booth, but we just clicked straight away. We very rarely talk over each other. We know what we're all there to do, and we all enjoy it as well, which I think helps.
For sure. Let's get into this September the 4th card, because I feel like these UK cards in the last couple of years have just gone strength to strength. Like, I remember the one from a few years ago, people saying this is the best UFC London card we've ever had. And then it feels like every year it just gets better and better. And then obviously we didn't have one earlier this year or last year. And then, we still don't, but I'm still counting it as a UFC London card. It's just not happening in London, which is obviously a huge shame. But I think probably it feels weird considering it's a card featuring Darren Till, but I think the fight that most people have got their eyes on is obviously the debut of Paddy, which obviously with yourself being around Cage Warriors since 2012, and I've been around Cage Warriors for quite a few years now, and it has always been Paddy. Like, it's always been a matter of when, like not if, but when. And I can't think of another fighter. Maybe there'll be one that comes to your mind, but where I've watched him really grow up through a promotion. It feels like we really started with Paddy at the start of his journey, and now we've got to this point, and there've been some ups and some downs and stuff. When you last saw Paddy compete in Cage Warriors, did you just know instantly that it was time? Because it felt like, as a fan watching, I've watched Paddy so many years, it was like it's finally clicked. It just felt right at that moment in time.
Yeah, I think, based on like previous guys who've gone from Cage Warriors to the UFC, Paddy probably could have gone a few years ago. Obviously, taking the situation with his hand injury and stuff like that out, the opportunity was there. He has had offers to go to the UFC, but I think he did the right thing, staying around Cage Warriors for a while. Look, it's no secret that he was packing out the Echo Arena. I'm sure he made a nice few quid off the ticket sales there. I'm sure he was probably on some tasty deal with Cage Warriors. So look, there's the financial aspect of it. Not that many guys on the European circuit get those opportunities to pack out a big stadium and make some really good money and just increase their profile that much. So when they go to the UFC, everyone's already talking about them as a potential star. He's already got the Ariel Helwanis of the world. He's already got half of Twitter loving him and half of Twitter hating him, which is exactly what you need. If you look at any big star in the history of the business, right back from the Shamrocks and Ortizes up to the McGregors of the current day, people will either pay to see you win or they will pay to see you lose. So as long as they're paying, it doesn't matter. You get paid at the end of the day. And Paddy's kind of built that reputation for him, he's got those iconic videos of his walkouts and you know, just the stuff that sells a fighter. And he's got, you know, he's got the attitude. He'll get into it on social media with people. And he's built that over the past few years, you know, coming up through Cage Warriors. And like you say, there's been ups and downs, right? You know, he's gone through some adversity. He's had some big wins. He's won title belts. He's had very high profile fights in huge arenas. And he's had some big losses as well. And, you know, those losses have come at home in Liverpool. So emotionally, he's been through the gamut as well. But surely that's brought a level of maturity to him as a fighter and a person that perhaps he wouldn't have got if he'd have just gone to the UFC on 9 or 10 wins 4 or 5 years ago. So it really does feel like the time is now. It sucks that this isn't going to be in England in front of a massive crowd. I think it's going to be in like the empty room in Vegas, right?
The Apex, You
know, talking to Paddy, obviously he fought a couple of times on the Cage Warriors events with no crowds, and you know, he said to me after the first one, you know, he just felt like he was in a sparring session. He didn't feel like the fight had really started.
Yeah.
And you know, I know he had, you know, he felt he had a lot more to prove with the second fight, and you know, just went out there and demolished the guy. But I think he feels like he's got a lot to prove again. You know, especially with the last 24 hours on Twitter, and you know, people getting on his back and all the drama that's gone down. He seems to be using that to motivate him. So you know, look, a motivated Paddy Pimblett is a scary guy, and you know what I always say about Paddy, and what always makes me, you know, do a real double take is you get this like happy-go-lucky guy dancing out to the walkout music, and then as soon as he gets in the cage and the door shuts, his eyes just go like that.
Yeah.
And then there's like that weird, like all his personality's gone, and he's just staring holes through you, and that's a terrifying prospect. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, man.
Yeah, I can't remember like obviously this has happened so many times, especially in recent years with guys going from Cage Warriors to the UFC, and it really feeling like they could go on to be something great. And obviously they're going to get compared to Conor McGregor because every fighter pretty much in the world does at some point. And there's always this big excitement of, oh, who's going up next. Obviously we had it recently with Ian Gary, like that's going to be another huge debut. But with Paddy, it almost felt like the momentum had to kind of be slowed down a little bit just so we could get to that place when it was the right time and not too early. Because, yeah, I think absolutely he made the right decision. I think if he had chosen to go when he was first offered it, it would have felt too soon. I think it would have been really exciting because he had so much momentum and energy on his side. But these last couple of performances of just... he looks like a UFC fighter. I don't know what it is. I know there was a lot of talk about his physique. He looked a lot bigger than the most recent fight, but there was just like a confidence around him that didn't just feel like maybe it was not having the crowd, because the crowd always felt like it was such a big part. It felt more complete, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you make a good point about, you know, even the things like the physique as well, because, you know, we think back to when we first started seeing Paddy fight on the UK scene. He was like 15, 16, and he was a skinny little bantamweight kid. So, you know, he's obviously growing out and he's filling his frame. You know, whether he ends up competing at featherweight or lightweight, you know, I remember him calling out a middleweight once on a regional show, you know, but I really don't think he cares that much. But, you know, I think it's like you say, it's the right time, not just in terms of his career and the momentum around him, but you know, he's obviously like physically in that place now where he's entering his peak years as an athlete. So, you know, all the clocks seem to be lining up for him, and you know, I wish him well. It's been an interesting couple of years for guys going from Cage Warriors to the UFC, because you know, with the matchmaking in the UFC at the moment, it's very much been a case of, look, you've got to fight who's available, and they've not really taken the time to build guys like they have done in the past. And you know, you see guys like Jai Herbert and Mason Jones just getting fed absolute killers out of the gate, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've got to be able to beat those guys if you're going to stay there. But it feels like things are getting back to normal now. It feels like they know they've got a potentially big star on their hands. So you know, hopefully we'll see Paddy giving some good opponents on the same level. And then, you know, fingers crossed, man, next March we'll get a UFC in London, and Paddy will be able to bring the home crowd support with him.
That'd be absolutely incredible. We talk about two other guys who, again, in recent years have come from Cage Warriors into the UFC, and I think both kind of in similar positions. I mean, their divisions couldn't be more opposite, but both you would say with a win on this card will be in the top 15 of their division, and that's Jack Shaw and Tom Aspinall. Like I said, completely different divisions because Jack Shaw has had to go through some killers to get anywhere near the top 15 of his division. Tom Aspinall, with just the nature of the heavyweight division, you go through it a lot faster. Obviously, still big wins on that run as well, but both of them, it felt like were outgrowing the European talent pool very fast to me when they were in Cage Warriors. I mean, Tom, again, just because the nature of the heavyweight division in Europe, it kind of felt like you were looking for opponents just so he could have more fights, like at that point. And with Jack, it always felt like the next best guy was still levels below him. I can't remember seeing two guys and being like, it's just a given. They will be in the UFC soon. And they've taken to it so well. Like I said, both huge fights. So what's your opinions on Jack Shaw and Tom Aspinall on their big fights?
Well, look, we talked about seeing Paddy grow up with Cage Warriors, and it's been exactly the same with Jack Shaw. We've literally seen him go from being an amateur at lightweight to turning pro, dropping to featherweight, dropping to bantamweight. The progression through the ranks and through the different levels of opposition was great. And as you say, by the time he got to the top of the mountain, there was no disputing the fact that he was probably the best bantamweight in Europe that wasn't signed to the UFC at the time. I don't think many people would argue with that. So seeing his progression and the fact that he's gone to the UFC and fought some really tough guys in his early fights and come out looking good, still undefeated. There's a bandwagon to be had there. If you're one of those fans that wants to jump on the next big thing early doors, get on the Jack Shaw bandwagon. He's a consummate martial artist, and obviously, he's been raised in the game. His dad, an OG of the UK MMA scene, and a great black belt jiu-jitsu guy. He's just been around that high level environment, and of course, they've got the big gym out there now as well. What more could you ask for a start in the sport? Tom Aspinall, as you say, very, very different, but in many ways the same. His dad as well, a legendary grappler here in the UK, and Tom's grown up around that sort of fighting lifestyle. He talked to my man Pete Cowell recently about the fact that when he went to the gym, there was no kids classes. So at 14, 15, he's getting flung around by blokes in their 20s and 30s. And what a trial by fire that is. We all know that he's done the sparring with Tyson Fury. We know that he's elite on the ground as well. UFC fans got a glimpse of that against a legend in Andrei Arlovski. People say what they want about Arlovski. Tough guy to beat, even tougher guy to finish. So that was a huge boon for Tom. He's got all the tools, right? He's got a cool personality. You can bang guys out, but he can fight wherever the fight goes. He's not one of those, big heavyweight sluggers that gets taken down and then it's game over. So I think a lot to look forward to, and a really good opponent for him as well. He's fighting a guy who, yes, has had a bit of time off, but this is a guy who's been battle tested regionally as well. He's fought some very tough, very experienced guys outside of the UFC, which you don't always get with heavyweights because the barrier to entry is a little bit lower, just because there's not many 250-pound guys that are athletic that aren't playing American football or basketball, right? That's just kind of how it goes. So looking forward to both of these for very different reasons. Hopefully we're going to see a big old slugfest with Tom, and hopefully we're going to see the next level of the evolution of Jack Shaw.
Weirdly, this is just a slight tangent. It's something I actually brought up to Jack when I spoke to him last. And both of them, both Jack and Tom, both do it. Obviously, Jack's game is largely built around his grappling. But both in their last fights, obviously, you saw Jack go toe-to-toe with an American wrestler, and he coped with that style incredibly. And then with Tom, you saw that grappling side, which you don't always get a glimpse of. He likes to keep it under wraps, but when it's there, he needs it. And he locked up Arlovski so fast. It was incredible. But like I said, it's something I mentioned to Jack last time, and I want to get your perspective on it because commentating for Cage Warriors since 2012, you must have seen it firsthand. I get a real kick out of seeing UK guys dominate other nations fighters with grappling. It's just, I'm so used to for so long the UK striker versus a grappler, and it's just always, can he keep it on the feet? Can he keep it on the feet? And either the wrestling or the jiu-jitsu isn't there or something. So seeing guys like Jack and Tom go in there and put on impressive grappling displays is just like, it's obviously I love seeing knockouts and things like that, but it's almost like an extra tick in my book. Like, okay, wow, so they can do that as well. Like they've got everything. You must have seen that firsthand with just from when you started with Cage Warriors to now, the grappling in the UK. Like, we've had guys like Jake Hadley come through Cage Warriors recently. Obviously, he'll be debuting on the Contender Series soon. We've got Jack Cartwright, another really strong grappler. Like, the UK grappling scene, and mostly, like I said, most it's come through Cage Warriors, has developed so much in the last few years. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, you know, with this part of the world, the grappling's kind of always been there, but we've just not seen the transition into MMA with it. You know, guys had maybe, you know, wrestled into their 30s and then switched to MMA, or wrestled into their late 20s and switched to MMA, or done jips and switched to MMA. But now we're seeing young guys who were literally brought up and you know, that yes, they grappled, and you know, we just talked about both Tom and Jack, both their old men are grappling legends, black belts, high level. So they've had that from sort of day one, but they've also had MMA from day one as well, and they both started with MMA. You know, that was the genesis of the journey through fight sports. So we're seeing guys just cross over a lot earlier now. Jack Cartwright, you know, he wrestled internationally as a kid, but as he came of age, straight into MMA. So obviously there's a much bigger and longer and more storied wrestling pedigree in America and in Russia, etc., and the same with jiu-jitsu in places like Brazil. But we've always had it, and I think now we're just seeing that level where, you know, we are catching up with the other nations who started mixed martial arts a lot longer before we did. You know, really there was mixed rules fights in the 90s here, but there wasn't really MMA till the sort of early noughties. So we've always been, you know, maybe 8 to 10 years behind the big developments in the sport. You know, we're also seeing, you know, big teams set up here now, and guys coming to England, coming to Ireland for various things, and our guys obviously going to train in America, going to train in different parts of the world, bringing those skills back over here. We've seen gyms attracting coaches from other parts of the world. So yeah, it's cool, you know, especially for someone like me growing up in England and then Holland as well, which is a big kickboxing country. I've always had that. Oh, you guys are just bangers. You guys are just strikers. Yeah. You know, Brits can't wrestle. You're just going to get taken down the sub. So it's nice to be able to have talismans like Jack Shaw, like Tom Aspinall, like Jack Cartwright, and the myriad other people who are coming through. You can actually be like, well, yeah, I'll box with you a little bit, but also I'll take you down, I'll mash your head in, and I'll make it unpleasant there as well.
Yeah, it's just something that for me is like I said, it's like an extra tick. It's almost like, okay, like now it's like a statement in a way, because you don't expect, people don't expect it, but because they're so used to not seeing it, I guess. I believe there is only 2 other Cage Warriors fighters on the card, and that is Molly McCann and I forgot his name for a minute. Modestus, of course. Which, by the way, this is again a weird tangent. When I spoke to Modestus the other day, he was in and out of Cage Warriors too fast for me to interview when I was writing for them, and so I didn't know that he had such a strong accent. So I'd only ever seen him with the flag. I didn't even know. I knew that he trained in England, but I didn't know he was like mostly lived his life there. So that was quite a shock when he joined the Zoom call. I didn't expect that accent out of him, which was very funny.
You know, talking about guys with dads with an MMA pedigree, his old man was fighting mixed martial arts bouts in the 80s.
Really?
So, yeah. Long before even the UFC was around. Oh. He was like some kind of he was like in the military, and he ended up doing some mad mixed rules, no holds barred fighting tournaments in the 80s. So again, another guy who's literally grown up in that fighting lifestyle.
With Modestus and Molly, you've got 2 people. Obviously, we just spoke about Jack and Tom, who are in a kind of similar place, and with Molly and Modestus, they're kind of in a similar place as well, I think, where they're in a bit of a rough patch, which obviously normally we'd be going into a London event and thinking you're on your home crowd, like you're the home field advantage kind of thing, like back against the wall. This is like made for you to set back up, but it's a difficult situation now with it being in Vegas and things like that. You don't have that advantage. How do you feel about this, like where they're at in their UFC careers so far, like I have confidence that they'll both get wins. I know they've both got tough opponents. I mean, Modestas specifically has had nothing but killers. I mean, that light heavyweight division, that you can't really go anywhere because there's so many tough guys and not a lot of depth to the division. So, but like I said, they're in quite difficult positions, I think.
Yeah, look, I think like you say with both those divisions, you know, if Molly had if Molly had won the fight she lost, you'd be talking about him, you know, possibly being in title contention soon.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, probably the same for Modestas. If you come in and got, you know, 3 big knockouts, then, you know, you're in the top 10 of light heavyweight. Yeah. That's just the way, you know, the way that division sort of lies. Look, you're absolutely right. They're both in a situation where they really need a win now. I think Modestas especially, obviously he got that crazy win in his first fight. And then he's dropped 2 on the bounce, and you think, you know, three on the bounce this early in his UFC career, are they going to, you know, keep him in, or are they going to give him his walking papers? So I'm sure he's 100% tuned into that, and you know, he's going to be going out there fighting for his UFC career, and just leaving it all in the cage. And we know he can do that. You know, he's a true martial artist, and he's a fighter as well. He'll happily go in there, and you know, he's the kind of guy who. He's going to put in the kind of performance that, win or lose, he'll be able to hold his head up high and say, you know what, I did everything I possibly could. I left it all in the cage. I think, again, with this one, I think he's going to force a man to shoot on him. So look out for those downward elbows up against the cage again. We've seen them so many times.
I mentioned it
to him. Great weapon.
I was like, I can't think of anyone that I associate with one specific technique as much as you and downward elbows. Like, it really is dangerous to go there with him.
You know, it's tough because it's you know, it can be very easily become a foul shot. But if you've drilled it and you know you've got that angle down, it's a deadly weapon, especially if you're known as a striker and you know people are going to be running you into the cage with that single legger and trying to take you down the cage. So you know, again, that for me could be one of the keys here. I think for Molly, the key is just going to be keeping her composure. You know, she's a very emotional fighter, and that's why we love her. I've been calling Molly's fights since she was an amateur. You know, I called her fight when she won her first pro title, and of course I called all the Cage Warriors fights as well. I've known her a long time, got all the Molly McCann meatball t-shirts, and you know, love her to bits. Yeah, very, very invested in Molly's career. She's an incredible, inspirational person, and she fights with her heart on the sleeve, and she lives with her heart on the sleeve. And I think it's just going to be a case of you know, just emptying the head of all those concerns, like, you know, it's not going to be in England, it's going to be in the empty room, and just getting zen about it, keeping composed, and keeping her game plan at the forefront of her mind. And I think if she does that, I think she's going to outbox her opponent, and of course mash it in with those takedowns. That, you know, she's so good at scoring points on the feet and then getting that takedown, maintaining the top positions. I think if she can keep to that game plan, she's on for a winner here. I think both these guys, as you say, tough fights, but I'm backing them both to win.
Yeah, for sure. Brad, thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure to go through those Cage Warriors fighters competing on September the 4th with you. We'll have to do this again, maybe before the next trilogy or something, break down some of those cards, because I can't wait for that event. Those trilogy events have been absolute gold every single time. So thank you very much, man.
No problem, my friend, at any time.
Cheers, mate. All right, have a good day.
Yeah, you too, brother. Take it easy.
See you later. Cool. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me and Mr. Brad Wharton for this kind of preview episode with a bit about Brad and his career as well. Yeah, massive thanks to Brad. You can go follow him on Twitter over at MMABrad48. Obviously, incredibly excited for that September 4th card. It's going to be on BT Sport. Though it hasn't been confirmed yet, it's believed to be on at UK prime time, so that should be around like a 9 o'clock main card, something like that. So perfect for sitting down and watching on a Saturday night. Should be a great event, and I absolutely cannot wait. Thank you for watching this episode. Please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of VMTV Vaults, which is what we usually do around here. I will see you on an episode of VMTV Vaults hopefully soon. Thank you. Goodbye.